All right, so you have a bone list posted, right? I'm gonna go through this bone list for you and point them out on the model bones here. These are fake bones. There's a separate video, it's called the Bones Introduction on there, that has 3D images of the bones that you can manipulate. And you might want to watch that to review the bone parts. So I'm just going to follow along on this list and then go through the different parts. Frontal bone, pretty easy, your forehead here. It goes back, ends at this suture, and this suture is called the coronal suture. Behind there are two bones called parietal bones. They are separated here by the sagittal suture. The bone in the very back is your occipital bone. There's a suture here called the lambdoid or lambdoidal suture. I've seen it both ways. On the side, you'll see a suture. It's not very pronounced in these skulls. Not very pronounced at all. But you can kind of see it here. This is a squamosal suture, and this is your temporal bone above your ear. So there's several parts of the temporal bone you have to know. You have to know this little indentation here, which is called the external acoustic or auditory meatus. Meatus is an opening. It's not quite a total hole like a foramen because it narrows. There's the temporal bone. The process here is called the mastoid process. You can feel this behind your ear. Sometimes it gets sore if you grind your teeth because your jawbone is attached there, but that's your mastoid process of the temporal bone, and that's the way you have to write it on an exam. There's also this pointy one here called the styloid process of the temporal bone, because there's other styloid processes of other bones. There is the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. You need to know that. And this part here is the actual temporal bone. I'm sorry, this is the actual zygomatic bone. Right here, your cheekbone. Okay. We also have here a big opening where your spinal cord goes up into the brain. That is called, it stands for big hole, the foramen magnum. Your atlas, cervical vertebrae number 1, sits on these two pronounced rounded areas called the occipital condyles. Now normally we would talk about all these holes here. There's your jugular foramen. You have a carotid foramen for the carotid artery, but we're going to leave those for cranial nerves. As long as we're looking down here, there's two bones here. In the front, this is still maxilla. The one on the back is your palatine bone, your hard palate. Do you need to know any others? Not here. Now your jawbone is the only movable bone of the skull. There's two little holes here called the mental foramen. And you see where the mandible articulates here and fits in. There's two processes here. Oops. Knew that would happen. The one here is what forms your temporal mandibular joint. We have a coronoid process of the mandible here. Okay. And this is your mandibular condyle right here. Your ramus technically is the bend here. We did all the sutures. Just checking my list here, make sure we got everything for the skull, and we do. And then we have a little bone that does not articulate with any other bone. See what your tongue muscle's attached to, and this is your little hyoid bone. It's a horseshoe-shaped bone, sits right in here. If you get strangled to death, means that it usually is broken. That's how they tell. I had a student years ago in high school, A&P, who we lifted up his neck, and you could see these two pointy projections here. And Jason said, "What are these?" And I said, "I don't know." And I called his mom, and I just told her, I said, "He's got these projections. I really don't know what they are."